Hello, friends, and let's get started.
I'm not the kind of husband who doubts his wife for no reason. I'm not the kind of husband who goes through his phone, checks receipts, smells his clothes. But that night changed everything. I woke up suddenly. You know when everything's quiet in the house, but something's wrong? My hand automatically reaches for her side. It's empty. The sheet was cold. I propped myself up on my elbow. I listened. Somewhere in the back of the apartment, the light of the screen flickered. I got up, tiptoed to the bedroom door, and peered into the living room. She was sitting on the couch wearing one of my t-shirts. One leg tucked up, phone in hand, eyes glowing bluish from the screen. And she was smiling. That's not the way you smile while flipping through the news. That's not how you smile at 3 in the morning when you just can't sleep. That's not how you smile when you're flirting with someone. I stayed in the shadows, watching. She typed something, froze, suddenly giggled briefly, swiped her finger across the screen, deleted the message, wrote again, deleting and rewriting. I don't know how many seconds I stood like that, but when she finally felt her gaze and looked up, I'd already figured it out. She flinched as if she had been caught doing something dirty. "What are you doing?" My voice was hoarse but steady. She blinked, as if she'd come out of a dream. "Nothing. I just couldn't sleep." She locked the screen too quickly. "Why aren't you in bed?" "I didn't want to wake you." I didn't say anything. The only thing pounding in my head was, "Do you think I'm stupid?" From that moment on, I no longer looked at her phone as a phone. It was a key to someone else's life that I wasn't invited into. I didn't ask. I didn't make a scene. I just decided, since you were hiding your fun from me, I'd have fun with you too. I wasn't going to throw a tantrum. I'm not the type. What's the point? If a man betrays you, scandals won't change anything. Either you accept the lie or you tear it up by the roots. But it's one thing to suspect and quite another to know. I want to be sure. I'd known Mark for 10 years. We worked at the same company together, then left it together. He was the kind of man who could walk into a bar, say 3 sentences, and 10 minutes later sit with a woman in the corner, making her forget why she'd come here in the first place. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked, twirling a glass of whiskey in his hands. We were sitting in a bar not far from his house. The time was approaching midnight, and someone was laughing softly behind the bar, but I didn't care. Yeah, and if she fell for it? I looked at him. Then I'll know. Mark didn't need to explain further. He always understood things faster than anyone else. Okay, how we play? I had a clear picture in my mind. My wife and her friends in a club. Alcohol, music, relaxed atmosphere. This is the moment when people take off their masks. When you no longer have to pretend to be loyal, faithful, when you can afford a little more. You go there first. You become part of the crowd. You watch it relax. You walk up and flirt. Yeah, like you're good at. Mark didn't need to explain the details. He knew women. He felt them in a way most men didn't even try. "Okay," he said and smiled. "But if she blows me off right away, you owe me at least a bottle left." I nodded. "And if she doesn't?" He looked at me and said regretfully, "Then we have a problem, brother." We agreed he'd text me as soon as it started. "Look, what if all of a sudden, well, she turns out not to be what you think she is? Are you sure you're ready to see that?" "I've already seen it, Mark. Now I just want to make sure." He nodded, took a sip of whiskey, and clapped me on the shoulder. "Okay, then get ready." I got home late. She was already asleep. I lay down next to her and closed my eyes, but there was no sleep, just a feeling of something inevitable coming at you. The next day, I kissed her on the cheek before work, asked her what her plans were. "Girls' night out," she smiled. I smiled back. "Okay, have fun." That evening, I sat in the kitchen and waited. The clock was showing almost 11 when the phone vibrated. "I'm in." Mark was game. All I had to do was wait. Mark entered the club first, as planned. His goal was simple. Walk in, find her, strike up a conversation. I sat at home with my phone in my hands. On the screen, a fading chat, an empty silence that was more annoying than 100 repetitive notifications. I stared at it like it was a crystal ball about to reveal the future. Nothing happened for 15 minutes. I was beginning to think Mark had changed his mind. Maybe it was for the best. Maybe it would all turn out to be a mistake, a silly fantasy in my overloaded head. Then I heard a vibration, short, sure, like the strike of a gong. She's with her friends, already had a couple cocktails. Relaxed. Those few words made my heart beat faster. Relaxed. So no longer on guard. I read the message over and over, as if that would make a change. I didn't call, of course. Why ruin the moment? Why let her know I was sitting here in the kitchen preparing to hear the worst? Another 10 minutes passed. The phone was silent. 100 thoughts began to swirl in my head. What did he say to her? How did she react? Maybe she noticed she was being checked out? Or maybe she now thought her husband was at home, unsuspecting, and she herself was hooking someone's phrases like a fisherman fishing for bream in calm weather. Then came the following message. Got to know each other. I said I was just looking for company. She's holding out so far, but clearly likes the attention. The word stabbed like a needle. Like the attention. I read the words slowly, breaking them apart. Does she like him? Or does she like being talked to? It could still be written off as her just being, outgoing. But I have my doubts. I imagine them. I pictured her. She turns her head, laughs, touches the glass a little to seem casual. Mark, of course, is confident. He knows how to present himself, how to hold himself. I was sure he'd find the right words. It was part of the plan, and he was executing it. And I sat leaning over the screen and felt something inside crack. When the next message from Mark appeared on the screen, I felt threatened. She laughs at my jokes, hugs my arm, leans closer, asking who I am and why I'm so lonely. Brother, she's already into it. I stared at the message, unable to believe my eyes, as if I had suddenly seen text in an unfamiliar language. I got up and walked to the window, trying to shake off the sudden feeling of suffocation. I looked out at the street and thought only of her, of my wife. I suddenly vividly remembered how just a couple days ago, sitting on this very couch, she had looked me straight in the eye and said, I think we're good. Why do you suddenly doubt it? Her look was not one of resentment, but of genuine surprise, and I thought I had invented a problem that didn't exist. How I wanted to believe that it was all just paranoia, a bad game of my tired mind. But now I was reading this dry, unrelenting message from Mark. I grabbed my phone again, scrolling up the message feed, as if hoping to find some clue there, anything that might give me confidence that Mark was wrong, that I'd misunderstood him, that this was all some kind of terrible joke. But the lines were mercilessly clear and precise. They told me one thing. My wife was now with another man and openly enjoying his attention. Another message popped up on the screen, short, almost careless. Are you okay? Hanging in there? I could barely type a reply. Fine. Keep going. Every second of the wait was torture. Pictures of what was happening right now, there in the club, were building in my head. I could clearly see Mark smiling at her, saying the right words, her responding with laughter, her eyes glistening from the alcohol she'd drunk and the pleasurable attention. I imagined her leaning a little closer, touching his arm to make the next line more personal, more intimate. I poured myself a glass of water, but I couldn't even take a sip, just stared blankly at my reflection in the glass. My face looked tired, aged, somehow alien. I wondered how long this had been going on, how long it had been since her heart had cooled so much that some random man could get more warmth and attention from her in half an hour than I had in months. Had she really forgotten everything between us so quickly? The phone vibrated again, and I quickly grabbed it. She said she misses the feeling of newness, that she wants to live, not exist. Sorry, bro, but she's made it clear she doesn't mind continuing the evening with me. I froze in place. My legs felt woozy, and my arms hung helplessly along my body. This was no longer just a breach of trust, no longer some petty flirtation for fun and self-esteem. This was something else, deep and real. The word about her lack of novelty pierced through me, because that was what I feared the most. That our married life had become boring to her, unbearable, and now she was seeking freedom and emotion in someone else's arms. In that second, I saw her in front of me as I hadn't seen her in a long time, smiling, happy, but alien. Not mine. Completely different, with an unfamiliar gleam in her eyes. I sank down on the couch, not letting go of the phone, feeling despair slowly replace anger. Why hadn't she told me this herself? Why had she chosen to reveal herself to a stranger rather than her own husband? It was worse than physical treason to realize that in all these years, she hadn't found the strength to talk to me honestly, preferring to spill her soul to the first person she met. In the silence of the room, filled with the barely audible ringing of tension, I sat staring at the screen of my phone, waiting to see what message would appear next. With each passing minute, the wait grew more agonizing, and my thoughts grew heavier and darker. Finally, the phone vibrated again. She suggests we leave here and go somewhere together. What should I do? I stared at the message, unsure of what to do next, hesitant to give it an answer. In that split second, I realized clearly that everything I had believed in up until that evening was in jeopardy, and my every next word could completely ruin my life. My fingers hovered over the phone's keypad. I was breathing heavily, and my blood pounded loudly in my ears, drowning out my thoughts. Answer it, stop it, or let it all go on and see how far she was willing to go. The phone vibrated so abruptly that I flinched. I'd sat clutching it before, but none of the messages that had come before had hit as hard as this one. I read it once, then again, and another. You won't believe this, but she has no boundaries at all. Your wife is already in my car. I felt the world shrink around me, becoming narrow, stuffy. The kitchen walls were pressing in, the air thick as syrup, each second stretching out as if someone had deliberately slowed down the passage of time. In the car, it wasn't just flirting. Not a smile, not a touch, not a slight, innocent moment of weakness. She left with him, with a man she'd known for less than an hour. I rose from the chair, feeling my hand shake. It wasn't pain in my chest, not resentment. It was something else, dark, prickly, tearing outward. I stood there, phone clenched in my fist, thinking, this is it. I didn't realize I'd started pacing back and forth in the kitchen. My throat was dry, my thoughts were jagged, chaotic. Part of me didn't believe it. Part of me hoped Mark was wrong. Maybe she just asked for a ride. Maybe something had been misunderstood. I dialed his number. He picked up right away. Are you serious? My voice sounded hoarse, like I'd just run a marathon. Yeah, man. She offered. We're standing outside the club. She's in the car, so she needs to think about it, but he stopped talking. But what? But I don't think she's going to change her mind. She's just like, you know what she's like. Eyes glistening, drunk, relaxed. Said she hadn't felt this free in a long time. I closed my eyes. Free. So she felt trapped around me? What do you expect me to do? Mark's voice sounded awkward. He didn't expect it to go this far. I didn't expect my wife to be the kind of person who would erase years of life together overnight. I don't know. I answered, and it was the truth. I didn't know anything. I didn't know what to do next. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how I was going to look at her when she came home. If she did. I didn't know her. The woman I'd lived with for so many years, who'd woken up next to me, who'd sworn her love, she was gone. Mark was silent on the other end of the wire. I could hear someone laughing in the distance, car doors slamming, music playing in the club. The world around me was living its life, unaware that mine had just collapsed. Are you going to tell me what to do? Mark finally spoke up. Do whatever you want with her. I disconnected the call and set the phone down on the table. A couple minutes later, the phone vibrated on the table, and I immediately knew it was her. Honey, the party's gone long. I'm staying at a friend's house for a sleepover. Love you. I reread the message 3 times. Not because I didn't understand it. It was because I wanted to feel every word. I pictured her, sitting in the semi-darkness in someone else's car, lit by streetlights, phone in one hand, perhaps a glass of wine or a cocktail in the other. She types a message, carefully choosing her words to sound natural. Not too formal, but not overly affectionate either. It had to look believable. I stare at those letters and feel the rage slowly but surely boiling up inside me. It's not even a lie. It's a taunt. She's not just saying she'll be late. She's writing love you. Love you. She's in the car with another man she knows less than the waitress at our favorite coffee shop. She lets him know she's ready to leave with him. And at the same moment, she writes me these 2 words. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees, my phone in the palm of my hand, the light of the screen hitting my face. I could make the call, hear her voice, hear her lie right in my ear, maybe even fake yawn to add plausibility. She'll say, honey, I'm so tired, we've been talking to the girls all night. I could have said one word, one name, Mark, and in that instant her breath would have come out. But I didn't. I didn't give her a chance to get out of it. I just wrote, "Okay, love. Sleep well." I pressed send and put the phone on the table. Then I got up, opened the cabinet, took out a bottle of whiskey, poured himself a glass, took a slow sip. The alcohol didn't provide relief, but I wasn't drinking for the sake of it. I drank because I knew tomorrow would be different, and she had no idea how different. I woke up earlier than usual. I got up, walked slowly to the kitchen, turned on a coffee maker. The machine hummed, and in this morning silence, it sounded too loud. Usually in the morning, she would come into my kitchen, wrap herself in my robe, yawn, rub her eyes, and smile. But today she had to come back from a sleepover at a friend's house. I sat down at the table, finally picked up my phone, unlocked the screen. "Good morning, my favorite. How are you? I'll be home soon." I read, and somewhere deep in my chest, there was that strange feeling when you realize the person in front of you is putting on a show, but doing it so brazenly that he's not even trying to convince you of his sincerity. I close my eyes, and for a second, I imagine her typing that message. Maybe in a cab, looking out the window, or standing in front of the mirror, adjusting her makeup to look like her night had been ordinary. I didn't bother answering. I just got up, poured myself a cup of coffee, sat down at the table and waited. About 40 minutes passed before I heard the key turn in the lock. She walked in, just as she had done hundreds of times before. No wariness, no guilt in her eyes, just a slight, strained smile. "Hi," she said. Her voice sounded a little softer than usual. I looked at her. It was noticeable that she was trying to look the same as always. But I knew her too well not to see the details. The thin streak of fatigue under her eyes. Slightly tangled hair. Clothes neat, but too neat, as if she'd changed clothes not in her bedroom, but in someone else's, trying to look normal. She walked over to me, leaned over, kissed my cheek. "You're up early?" I nodded, took a sip of coffee. "Are you okay?" she asked. It was a stupid, cloying question. I looked at her and finally said my first word since she'd walked through the door. "How did you sleep?" I saw something flicker in her eyes. A split second, almost imperceptible, but I saw it. She smiled, averting her eyes. "Oh, we stayed up so late. My friends kept me up talking, but it was fun." I nodded again, keeping my gaze on her. Mark would disagree with that. There was silence. She froze. Her face didn't change instantly, but there was fear in her eyes. The kind that comes to a man who hasn't realized how much he's caught, but already knows something's gone wrong. "What?" "Mark," I repeated calmly. "The guy you were with at the club last night." She didn't breathe. She didn't blink. I don't understand." I set the cup aside and leaned forward slowly. "You do understand," I said quietly. "You understand perfectly." She swallowed. In that second, I didn't see the confident, playful woman who'd left yesterday with another man, but someone else. She stood across from me, still holding the bag on her shoulder, as if she were going to turn and run away at any moment. The room was quiet, only the clock on the wall ticking. "You dash," she swallowed, exhaled, but her voice still sounded tense. "What are you talking about?" I took my time answering. I looked at her, saw the corner of her eye twitch with a barely perceptible nervous tick. She was trying to figure out how much I knew. I was in no hurry to make it easy for her. "At the club," I said calmly. "You met Mark. Do you know who he is?" She frowned. Theatrically. "Mark who?" "My friend." Silence. She stood still, but I could see the storm brewing inside her. She was rapidly going through her options in her head, but she couldn't realize how deep she was in this shit. I don't know what you mean," she finally squeezed out. "You do." I stood up. She took a step back, but she pulled herself together. "What the hell are you talking about?" Her voice trembled, but she quickly pulled herself together. "I was really with my friends. You can ask them." I grinned. "Oh, I even know what they'll say. They'll say you left early, that you got bored, that you took a cab, or something like that. You've prepared an alibi, haven't you?" There was a flash of panic in her eyes. That was quick, almost imperceptible. "Were you following me?" I tilted my head to the side. "Why did you think of it so immediately?" She opened her mouth to say something, but changed her mind. I took a step closer. "Yesterday you texted me that you were spending the night at a friend's house. And at the same moment, you were in a car with another man. You should explain yourself." She jerked like she'd been hit. "You've got all wrong," she said quickly. It's just an acquaintance. Really, just an acquaintance? Yes, she nodded, more confidently now. We were just talking, and I took out my phone, unlocked the screen. I opened the chat room. I read out loud. You're not going to believe this, but she doesn't have any boundaries. Your wife is already in my car. I looked up. She was really pale now. Silence. A slight trembling of her fingers. I watched as her breathing became shallow, the tension in the corners of her lips. This was it, the moment of truth. Who wrote this to you? She whispered. I didn't answer. I just stared. She jerked her shoulder, licked her lips, tried to pretend she was angry. Is this some kind of prank? Did you send some friend of yours to see me? Yes, I said calmly. She froze. I saw her face go completely blank. Like in an instant, something inside her had snapped. Were you testing me? Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper. And you were betraying me. Silence again. I could see her real reaction now. Not anger. Not outrage. Fear. She stood before me, lost, cornered, and most importantly, exposed. I could see her thrashing around in her thoughts, frantically trying to find a way out, but there was no way out. Not this time. She opened her mouth, but the words stuck in her throat. I can explain. I sighed. Don't. She raised her head sharply, as if she'd been slapped. But, don't. I don't need excuses. I looked at her calmly, coldly. You made your choice. Now I'll make mine. I walked past her into the hallway. She turned around to follow, her eyes racing, her breathing becoming intermittent. Wait, you're what? What are you going to do? I grabbed my keys from the table by the entrance, threw on my jacket. Me? I grinned, not turning around. I'm going to move on with my life. Without you. She froze, and then she rushed over to me, grabbed my sleeve. No, please no. Darling, it was a mistake. I didn't mean to. I turned around and looked her in the eye. And I didn't want to find out like this that my marriage was a lie. But as you can see, we both got what we didn't want. I took her hands off me, stepped over the threshold. Wait, there was panic in her voice. Let's talk. Let's try to work this out. I stopped for a second. We've already worked it out. I have nothing more to talk to you about. I slammed the door behind me. I didn't come back that night, nor the next. She called, texted, tried to get through to me somehow. Her messages were first panic, then remorse, then anger. It's all your fault. You ruined our marriage. You tested me like I was a criminal. I didn't answer. You know, when you live in an illusion for so long and then it suddenly crumbles, you don't feel rage. You don't even feel pain. Just emptiness. I filed for divorce a week later. She begged me to give her a chance. Said nothing had happened, that it was all stupid, that I'm really the only one she loves. But her words didn't mean anything anymore. Once trust is broken, it can't be repaired. I took my stuff, signed the papers, and left. Forever. A few months later, I heard she had a new boyfriend. But I didn't care anymore. I didn't ask about her anymore. I didn't look for information. I didn't wonder how she was doing. Her life went on its own way, and I finally got mine back. And that's where today's story ends. Thank you for watching to the end. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and comment. We'd love to discuss this story with you. See you in the next video.